Voting opened up late last week, I believe. Caitlin Clark's not first. She's not second. She's not third. She's not fourth. But she's fifth. You guys have managed to turn off so many of her fans, so many of her supporters, that they aren't even going out of their way to vote her as an all-star team captain.
There was a time when the idea of Caitlin Clark sitting anywhere outside the top spot in fan voting would have sounded impossible. Caitlin Clark didn't just enter professional basketball as another highly drafted rookie. Caitlin Clark arrived carrying unprecedented momentum, record-breaking television ratings, sold-out arenas, and an entirely new audience that followed her from college basketball into the professional game. Yet suddenly a shocking number appeared beside Caitlin Clark's name. Fifth, not first, not second. Not even within immediate striking distance of the top spot. For a player who transformed attendance, merchandise sales, media attention, and national conversation, Caitlin Clark being positioned this low immediately raised questions throughout the basketball world. How could a player who became the face of an entire movement find herself trailing multiple stars in a fan-driven vote? The answer isn't necessarily about talent. Nobody seriously questions Caitlin Clark's talent. The answer may be about perception. Over the last year, Caitlin Clark has become the center of nearly every major WNBA discussion. Every hard foul, every controversy, every debate about officiating, every discussion about league marketing, every conversation about player treatment somehow circles back to Caitlin Clark. At the same time, Stephanie White inherited one of the most closely watched teams in sports. Expectations exploded, pressure increased. Every lineup decision, every offensive adjustment, every public statement became magnified under a microscope. Now the Indiana Fever find themselves facing a question nobody expected to ask. Did the organization successfully build upon Caitlin Clark's popularity, or did the handling of Caitlin Clark slowly erode the enthusiasm that once seemed unstoppable? Because fan voting isn't just about basketball. Fan voting is often a measurement of emotional connection. And if Caitlin Clark is suddenly sitting outside the very top tier of voting returns, it may signal something much bigger than an all-star race. The most surprising aspect of this story isn't that Caitlin Clark trails elite players. The surprise is the size of the gap.
We have A'ja Wilson 1. Let's blow this up. Let's actually blow this up. We have A'ja Wilson 1 with 308,000. Paige Beckers 2, 298. Aaliyah Boston 3. We've to the point 282,000. Brianna Stewart 4, 255,000. And then Caitlin Clark 253,000. 55,000 votes behind A'ja Wilson.
Those numbers immediately create a narrative problem for the Indiana Fever. For over 2 years, Caitlin Clark has been the sport's biggest attraction. Networks adjusted schedules because of Caitlin Clark. Arenas moved games because of Caitlin Clark. Opposing franchises experienced attendance spikes because Caitlin Clark was coming to town. Historically, when a player generates that level of interest, fan voting becomes almost automatic. Fans don't simply support the player. Fans actively campaign for the player. That is why seeing Caitlin Clark behind several competitors creates such a dramatic contrast with expectations. The Indiana Fever entered this season believing they were transitioning from rebuilding franchise to championship contender. Caitlin Clark and Kelsey Mitchell formed a dangerous backcourt. Aaliyah Boston continued developing into one of the league's most important young stars. Stephanie White arrived with championship expectations attached to her coaching philosophy. Instead of conversations centered exclusively around winning, however, much of the public discussion revolved around controversies. Questions emerged regarding offensive flow. Questions emerged regarding player usage. Questions emerged regarding physical treatment directed at Caitlin Clark. Questions emerged regarding how aggressively the franchise defended its biggest star. Whether those criticisms are fair or unfair, perception matters. When fans feel frustrated, they disengage. When fans feel disconnected, they become less motivated to participate. The danger for Indiana is not one disappointing voting update. The danger is what the voting update may represent. If Caitlin Clark's most passionate supporters are less energized than they were 12 months ago, that affects far more than an all-star ballot. It affects ticket sales. It affects television audiences. It affects social media engagement. Most importantly, it affects the emotional momentum that originally transformed Caitlin Clark from superstar player into cultural phenomenon. For a franchise that built its future around Caitlin Clark, maintaining that connection isn't optional. It's essential. Great athletes don't simply battle opponents, they battle expectations. And nobody in professional basketball faces expectations quite like Caitlin Clark.
This is a direct result of Stephanie, Amber, Lynn, Kelly. The WNBA drama, the media hit pieces, time and time again. Just turning fans off, not knowing how to market your players properly. Not utilizing your stars correctly. Trying to make everybody else feel important while leaving the biggest star off to the wayside.
The psychological side of this story is fascinating. Caitlin Clark entered the league carrying pressure rarely experienced by any rookie in sports history. Every game became national news. Every shooting slump generated headlines. Every victory created celebration. Every defeat triggered debate. That environment can affect everyone around a franchise. It affects coaches, it affects teammates, it affects executives, it affects fan expectations. Stephanie White's challenge became balancing immediate competitiveness with long-term development. That is easier said than done. Throughout basketball history, generational stars have often experienced turbulent transitions. Early versions of championship teams rarely look polished. They often feature confusion, experimentation, and internal tension before eventually finding identity. The difference is that most stars develop away from constant national scrutiny. Caitlin Clark doesn't have that luxury. Every strategic adjustment becomes public discussion. Every offensive possession becomes evidence for someone's argument. Every substitution becomes controversy. That level of attention creates pressure on everyone involved. Fans watching Caitlin Clark don't simply want victories. Fans want affirmation that the franchise fully understands the value of what it possesses. When supporters believe Caitlin Clark is being maximized, excitement grows. When supporters believe Caitlin Clark is being limited, frustration grows. That's why coaching decisions receive extraordinary scrutiny. The conversation extends beyond wins and losses. It becomes symbolic. Fans see Caitlin Clark as a transformational player capable of elevating the entire league. Any perceived failure to fully embrace that transformation becomes magnified. Whether justified or not, those perceptions shape public enthusiasm. And enthusiasm ultimately influences everything from attendance to all-star voting. The challenge for Stephanie White isn't merely coaching basketball. The challenge is managing the expectations surrounding one of the most influential athletes the league has ever seen.
Because Caitlin Clark is fifth. That's an indictment on the front office. There's no other way about it. You got Angel Reese 7th, Olivia Miles 9, Kelsey Mitchell 10, AZ Fudd.
Because once fan momentum begins fading, rebuilding that momentum becomes extremely difficult. The Indiana Fever invested heavily in building around Caitlin Clark. Every major organizational decision now connects to her success. Every championship aspiration runs through her development. Every business projection assumes Caitlin Clark remains the centerpiece of the franchise. That makes public engagement incredibly valuable. The Fever don't simply need Caitlin Clark to perform. They need Caitlin Clark supporters to remain emotionally invested. If enthusiasm declines, business consequences follow. Attendance growth slows, national attention decreases, merchandise demand softens, corporate partnerships become less explosive, media coverage shifts elsewhere. That is why this all-star voting conversation matters. It serves as an early warning indicator, not necessarily of basketball failure, but of fan sentiment. The Fever still possess tremendous advantages. Caitlin Clark remains one of the most recognizable athletes in America. Aaliyah Boston remains a cornerstone talent. Kelsey Mitchell remains a dangerous scorer. Stephanie White still has time to guide the roster toward its potential. Yet urgency exists, because fan relationships are fragile. The same supporters who helped create unprecedented excitement can become frustrated if expectations repeatedly go unmet. Looking forward, the Fever must create a clear identity. They must maximize Caitlin Clark's strengths. They must establish consistency. They must deliver results that match the enormous expectations surrounding the franchise. If that happens, fan voting numbers can change quickly. If it doesn't, this ranking could become remembered as the first visible sign that excitement was beginning to cool. And that would represent a far larger challenge than any single game on the schedule.